Right, so as we've been doing, you'll notice in the whole school now, we've started doing this thing about learning intentions and success criteria. So our intention today, you don't need to write it down because it's already there for you, is to be able to recognize randomly generated or rule-based number patterns. So whether a bunch of numbers are random, okay, meaning there's no pattern, or if it's a rule, if there's some sort of pattern that's happening that's reoccurring. Also, the idea is we're going to try and find a rule that describes what's happening to the number pattern. Okay? We're also going to figure out how to name your terms. So this is where people are like, oh, what's T1? What's T2? What does A mean? That's what this means. Okay? We're going to name these patterns. And obviously, as a success criteria, you're going to be able to figure out whether something is random or rule-based, whether you can find, and you'll be able to find some sort of rule for that number pattern, and you'll be able to use these symbols as a way to name your terms. Okay, so that's what we're focusing on. So let's go to 8A, that page here. All right, so basically, when you think of number patterns, okay, you're always looking at a sequence or a bunch of numbers, like a list of numbers. So a sequence or a number pattern is basically a sequence or a list of numbers, okay, and there's a certain order to it. But also there could be no order to it. It could just be random, okay. The number of items in a sequence are called your terms. So we don't call them numbers, we call them terms, okay. Obviously they are numbers, but these are called terms in a sequence, okay. So we call them terms. So if you don't know what the word term means, it's just referring to numbers. Numbers in a sequence. Okay? Okay, and they could be generated either randomly or there's a rule to it. Okay, so if you look at these two sequences, can anybody see, is there a pattern happening with the first sequence? No, why not? It's kind of random. 3 to 1, okay, that's gone down by 2. Then to 2, it's gone up by 1, but then it's 2 again. Then it goes up by 4, goes down by 2, goes up by 1. It's too random. There's no real sequence here. We don't know what's happening. It's just a random set of numbers. What about the second set? Or the second? Yeah, so it's gone up by 2. Okay, so that means as a rule, we can say it goes up by 2, or you could say plus 2. For next sequence or for next number. Oops. So you can get plus 2 for next term. Okay, so you can see, okay, that your number patterns will either be random. So this is random, but this one down here has a certain rule. Okay, and now you can just write rule equals plus 2 or something like that for the moment. Okay. Shh. Are we writing the notes, boys? Okay, you've already missed out on half of them. Okay, so let's look for a pattern for these ones. So I'll give you maybe a couple of minutes just to figure out what is the pattern for each. And as a rule, I want you to write it like this. So just write rule equals and then write what's happening to the rule. Is it plus 2? Is it minus 2? Is it times? Is it divide? If it's random, then just write random. Okay, so find the rules for these examples here. Rules that we can use for these. Okay, so don't get too scared about whether or not you need to write your rule like this. There will be actual rules for them. Okay, so yep, we've done that. Okay. Alright, so the next part now is how do we name a sequence? So let's go to the next page, I think. Naming a sequence. So remember, a sequence is just a list of numbers. Okay. Sequence just means list of numbers. Okay. So if you were to find that you have a list of numbers or a sequence, there's a certain way to name each term. Okay, or each number. Remember, you don't call the numbers numbers, you just call them terms. Okay, we call them terms. So you'll see here these symbols, T1, T2, T3. These are the labels we use for the terms in the sequence. So T1 just means term 1. Okay, T2 means term 2. T3 means term 3. Okay, now understand as well that T1 means the first number. Okay, there's a difference between T1, and we'll get into this later, and T0. Okay, and you would have learnt this last year. What is T1? What is T0? Okay, T1 refers to first number or first term. T0 refers to the starting number or the starting term. Okay, we'll get into what T0 means later on or probably next term. But understand that for now, T1 just means first number. Okay, and these are used as labels or names for the first, second, and third numbers in a term. And this goes on forever. You can have T4, you can have T5, T6, all the way up to T100. Okay, 100 numbers or 100th term. Yes, Bella. Yes, T1 is just referring to the first number. T0 is referring to the starting number. It's different. It depends on what you're doing in mathematically, but that'll come later on when we start working with different questions. Okay, but for now, just understand T1 is the first number. Also, just a heads up, these little when you see T1 like this, let's see if it has it here. Yep, when you see this. Right there, that's called a subscript, but here, so this is a subscript. Actually, that should be subscript. This is a superscript, yeah. I don't know why they've called that subscript. So this is a subscript, a little number in the bottom, right? But don't worry too much about it. Just put the little number there. So whenever you're naming a term, don't just go T1. Okay, name it like this, T1. Or T2, whatever it might be. Don't go T2. Don't do T squared, because that means T squared, okay? So use a subscript. Alright, so they tell us, again, the subscripts tell us the position of each term in the sequence. So T10 just means the 10th number. Okay, easy. Alright, so what I want you to do for these sequences is label what is T1, what is T4, what is T6 in this sequence. What's first number, guys? 2. So the way you want to write your answer, don't just write 2 for me. Write it like this. T1 equals 2. First number is 2. Okay, make sure you put the subscript in. T4, good. Fourth number is 20. And then T6, 32. Okay, I'm going to add one more here. What is T7? Okay, why 38, Keaton?
Because the rule is plus 6.
Good, so the rule is plus 6 each time. So that means the next number, T7, should be 38, hypothetically, which is correct anyway. And then if I ask you T9, T10, you're just going to keep adding 6 each time. Okay, so guys, that's basically it for 8A. Now I'm hoping that we were able to, recognize our success criteria is that we can understand whether something is random or rule-based. Yes, we get it. We can find a rule, and in terms of the rule, we just write rule equals, whatever the rule might be, and then the symbols or the labels for the terms refer to these. Yeah? So T1 means first term, T2 second term, T3 is third term. Okay, but that's basically it. Let's get into chapter 8A, and we'll do these questions.